So with any luck, Nigel, we in America are going to hear a lot more about you in the upcoming years in the UK. Tell us about yourselves. About yourself. Tell us what Americans should know about you.
Well, I mean, I worked for American companies for 20 years. I worked in business, which is unlike most people in politics these days. Most of people have never had a proper job, and that's true. I got engaged in, I was always keen on current affairs. You can't work in financial markets, commodity markets, without current affairs dominating the conversation every day. I got engaged in politics because I saw something happen with the European Union, our membership of it, which basically was the birth of globalism. The idea that the nation state doesn't really matter, that borders don't really matter, that you can hand big decisions up to a bureaucratic class who never themselves have to be held accountable to electors. And so I got involved with the campaign. I really got started in 1993. And I mean, everyone thought I'd gone mad. I mean, because this was the status quo. We joined Europe, it had evolved into a European Union. Every political party supported membership, every big business supported membership, every trade union supported membership. I mean, it was almost like blasphemy to say that we should become independent and not be part of it. And so I've been a relentless campaigner for that, year after year after year, a genuine grassroots movement. There really were no significant public figures leading the campaign. I was completely unknown. I toured the country for years, speaking in town halls, the back room of pubs. It was almost like a mission.
Cigar lounges?
Yeah, well, of course. It was almost like a sort of missionary job, really. Then I got elected to the European Parliament in 1999, which gave me a platform. People thought it was ironic that I was joining a parliament I didn't want us to be a part of, but it was a great platform. And basically, we built the UK Independence Party into a major party in British politics. We scared the Conservatives so much that they thought the only way they could get rid of us was to say, well, we'll give the British people a referendum, which they weren't worried about at all, because obviously, the British people would do what their lords and masters wanted them to do. And I think that referendum result was the first significant blow against these globalist institutions that have been building steadily since the 1950s. So that's really how people knew me in America. And of course, American media was all over it. I did 3 years as a contributor to Fox News. I got involved with the Trump campaign in 2016. Bannon was really keen that I could try and get the Brexit argument into American politics. And the argument was, forget the fact that polls say you're 10 points behind. They're saying that deliberately to try and suppress turnout.
Just like they do in all our elections.
If we can beat the establishment, then you guys, with Donald Trump, can beat the establishment. And of course it happened in November 16. And I've become friends with Trump and the Trump family and the Trump campaign. So I've actually spent 35 years commuting back and forth across the Atlantic, whether it's in...
Well, I'm glad you're doing it now.
And I've come to
smoke with you.
And I've come to Heartland, where I see a group that produces real fresh thinking, is unafraid to challenge the status quo. Well, that's kind of where I fit in.
Well, that means we have to keep working together.
Well, absolutely.
In 2016, for the Brexit vote, that you, of course, were the leader of the Brexit movement. It seemed to, at least me, and I imagine most Americans, that this was pointless. There's no way you were going to win the vote. It was a shot heard around the world, to use an American historical reference here. So being in pubs, talking with people on the street, is there anything more to it? Is there a sentiment? You mentioned earlier conservatives, that you were fighting conservatives.
So cool.
Right, exactly.
So cool.
So do you have that same frustration at the grassroots level that we had here prior to 2016, that our so-called conservative leaders weren't really conservative?
Well, I mean, even when the Brexit vote had happened, we had a Conservative government in power. They did nothing with it. So I had to come back again in 2019. We had another election to the European Parliament because we were still members. I set up the Brexit Party. We won the election by miles, which led to the resignation of Theresa May as Prime Minister, which was a very good scalp. And Boris Johnson, I helped him significantly in that general election in which he got the biggest majority for a Conservative since Thatcher way back in the 80s. And, he was elected as a Conservative and governed as a Liberal. And that's why I'm back again at this time with Reform UK. And I've given up on the British Conservative Party. They will never be Conservative. And the difference here is that you have open primaries. Trump was able to come through the open primary system, become leader of the Conservative movement and the Republican Party. That isn't open in Britain. They don't have open primaries. They keep it within their own little club. I think if Donald Trump hadn't become the leader of your movement, I think the American Republicans would be very similar to the British Conservatives.
That would be a shame. So I look at the polling from the UK as they're taking odds on the next prime minister and then next, of course, nationwide elections. And it's something to see the movement in your favor. It does remind me of, I remember back in 2015, and I would be out speaking at Tea Party events and meeting with them. And at the time, we weren't sure if Trump was really going to be conservative, but he resonated with people that were tired of the establishment, whether they call themselves conservatives or liberals or not. And here in the United States, many conservatives, many free market libertarians have always had this love in their hearts for the Tories. And how disappointing.
Oh, I mean, if you think you're disappointed, how do you think we feel? I mean, millions of Conservative voters in Britain just feel completely betrayed by them on everything. Promising to reduce the numbers coming into our country legally. They've gone through the roof to levels that have made everything, housing, health, transport. I mean, our population, bear in mind, we're much smaller. Our population has increased by 10 million. We've gone from 57 million to 67 million in the space of the last 20 years.
Wow.
I mean, that's in percentage terms, for a country with nothing like the landmass that you've got, this has had a fundamental effect on the life of almost everybody. Driven wages down, it's made housing unaffordable. And it wasn't a big surprise that Tony Blair started all of this, but a shock that the numbers got even bigger under Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak, who took over from it. So you've got that. On net zero, well, look, we all want to live. We all want clean rivers and clean seas and a decent future for our kids and all of those things. But what we've done in the main, it was Boris said, the UK is going to become the Saudi Arabia of wind. So we're building massive wind farms, particularly in the North Sea, which, as you well know, produces expensive, intermittent energy.
Of course.
And we've got, our electricity prices are the highest in the whole of Europe. Our gas prices are double for the consumer, the industrialist, what they are for you in this country. And, just in the last week, the biggest oil refinery in Britain has announced that it's closing. One of our last producers of primary steel is closing with a loss of 3,000 jobs and an application for a coal mine that digs deep anthracite, necessary in many industrial processes, has been refused. So we are seeing an industrial massacre. Our carbon dioxide emissions have reduced by about 50% since 1990. We've reduced more than any other country in the Western world. And what does it achieve? All that happens is we become importers of oil, importers of gas, importers, once the refinery's gone, of petrol products, diesel products, etc. And the whole of Westminster goes round, patting themselves on the back, saying, aren't we doing a great job? We're saving the planet. When even if we're terrified about carbon dioxide, We produce less than 1% of the world's output. So, and this again is something that the Conservatives have done. So they turn their back on almost everything their voters believe.
So here across the pond, as I root on the Reform Party, I look forward to a future, perhaps Nigel Farage in the Prime Minister's office. But in the meantime, we have these self-proclaimed conservatives. Is there any hope for them seeing the light on climate realism, on sound energy policy that's not just socialism in disguise?
I don't see it. I just don't see it. And look, maybe 5-10 years hence, I might give you a different answer. But for the moment, no, they're wedded. They're absolutely wedded to this. They're fearful of criticism. They know that the British media would have a go at them. But, politics is about being a signpost, not a weathercock that gets blown around by the current prevailing wind. It's about saying, this is where we ought to be going and putting the rational arguments for it. And when you do that, when you fight a consensus, when you fight a status quo, you necessarily get criticized. And it's like a modern breed of politician is scared of being criticized. Well, that's not leadership, that's followership.
Yeah, it reminds me of Donald Trump staking out his position, supporting fracking,
Yep.
natural gas production, coal production, and when it wasn't popular, Kamala Harris and others, I'm going to ban fracking. Now, by showing that leadership, by not just moving with the wind, now even Kamala Harris says, "Oh, I support fracking. I want us to be energy dominant,
energy independent," and yeah. No, as you say, a lot of those things in life, you start off with a minority position, necessarily, because you're up against what the prevailing status quo is. And that takes courage, it takes leadership.
So tell me about what you're seeing among the people in the UK. Are they catching fire for this wisdom that you are presenting and the possibility of ending, which is pretty much a uniparty, it seems to me, in the UK, like it was in America before Donald Trump.
And
are you gaining ground?
Oh, we're gaining ground. There's no question about that. We are gaining ground. And the one area that I find particularly interesting is Gen Z. Because I'm appalled at our schools and universities. I'm appalled at the indoctrination that our kids are being put through. And yet it seems Gen Z are beginning to rebel and rebel against this in quite a big way. Nation matters, community matters, borders matter, and actually values, the values that have made our country great matter. And I think there is a growing feeling amongst all age groups that these things are being shredded, literally being shredded in the most extraordinary way. A deep feeling of disquiet that something is very wrong with the country. And it's pretty much the same here too.
Yeah, I'm reminded of, I was very young at the time, but still when Ronald Reagan was elected president here, Margaret Thatcher, Prime Minister in the UK, and just the seismic shift, not only in politics and specific policies, but just in the view of what the role of government is, the importance of freedom. And here we seem to have, with Donald Trump's rise here in America, with I think the Reform Party is starting to show signs of catching fire in the UK and throughout the European continent. You see grassroots conservative populism taking off. So what are the opportunities for us to work together? What's the opportunity for the Heartland Institute to be of assistance in Europe and UK in particular? And what would you be looking for from people in Europe and America?
Well, I mean, what you guys do is, you challenge the established view. You challenge the established view. You do it with high-end research. You do it with some top scientists. I think your input on the other side of the pond will be very valuable because there aren't many groups over there actually challenging what is going on. In Brussels, the epicenter of globalist governance, there's hardly anybody challenging what is being done in the name of fighting climate change. And I repeat the point, we all want to live in a good environment. But what is being done isn't making any blooming difference anyway. If you look at the pace of industrialization, I mean, take coal, for example. Very interesting. I mean, Boris, when he was Prime Minister, said it's the end of coal. Coal will become an historic product. Do you know this year, the world's going to burn 8 billion tons of coal? Indonesia alone has 250 coal-fired.
Where are they getting it from? Not the United States anymore.
No, I'm afraid your production's being cut right back. In the Indian election, Modi, in the Indian election, boasted to the Indian people that they were now producing 1 billion tons a year of coal. So I think that Heartland, with your track record of what you're able to do as a relatively lean, nimble organization, your ability to inject into public debate new thinking and new ideas. No, I genuinely think it'd be welcome on the other side of the pond. And of course, attacked as well. But then the more you're attacked, the more you know that you're actually saying stuff that resonates.
So one of the things that I love about America, and I love going to Europe, I love going to the UK, but one thing I find rarely there is a nice cigar lounge where we can sit back, have a nice selection of cigars, we're indoors, we're not subjected to the cold and the elements. So what are you going to do, Nigel, to bring about more freedom of smoking?
Well, this is all about the size of government, isn't it? Getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And Keir Starmer, who's been in power now for 70 days, one of his first big announcements, he wants to ban smoking outside. So, I mean, take an English country pub, and you go and sit in the garden, and he's saying he's contemplating banning smoking in areas like that. And it's just, and here's the irony. We've got a massive problem with Class A drugs, which do huge short-term damage to people. We're not even having a conversation about it because government's given up dealing with things that are illegal, but now cracks down on things that are legal. So, the pandemic, if you think about it, was the biggest power grab by governments in the Western world. They took away far more freedoms than anyone did during World War II. Now, they locked us in our houses. We had repeated lockdowns, 3 major lockdowns we had in the UK. Huge psychological damage done to many, many people. Terrific health repercussions because so many people weren't being screened for diabetes, for cancer, for all of those things. Massive financial costs. And here we are, 3 years on, and nobody in government or authority has even thought to apologize. But the powers that government takes in a crisis, it's always very reluctant to hand back. And the size of a state is, of course, reflected in rising taxes, in reduced freedoms, and in a welfare bill and a welfare society that is challenging, damaging the very culture of a work ethic. So, we finished up with millions. We've got about 9 million Brits of working age not working. That is catastrophic for productivity, catastrophic actually for the individual health of all of those people, because for 99% of people, work is good. It gives people a sense of purpose. So look, the rise of the big state, the exponential growth of the big state is what I do intend to fight. I'm not pretending it'll be easy, but it's really important.
And it's so important. So when I travel to Europe or really anywhere here in the United States as well, when I was in London, we met in October, one of the great pleasures I have after we had dinner together was strolling around St. James area in London and just having a nice cigar, strolling around, taking in the vibe of the city and just enjoying it. So under a Nigel Farage at 10 Downing Street regime, I'll be able to keep doing that, you're telling me? I hope so.
Liberty, as really defined by John Stuart Mill, back in the 19th century, liberty is being able to pursue the activities that you wish to pursue, provided they're not causing harm to others.
That's perfectly stated.
The common sense approach that we need.
Perfectly stated. So you're a good friend of Donald Trump.
Yep.
So Do you have any stories, interesting stories, tidbits that you're able to share?
One of the reasons that I'm friends with him is because he knows he can talk to me and trust me not to blab.
No, and yet here I am. Wow.
No, and so I'm always very cautious. You know, I never relay exact conversations that we have. All I will say is he's tremendously good company. And you know what? You can judge someone. You can judge someone by how they treat, particularly people in high positions in society. You can judge them by how they treat those of lower status. And by that I mean how you treat, the waiter, the server that comes to your table, how you treat the driver, how you treat the security detail that's with you. It's a very, very good way of judging what human beings are really like. And I've watched him again and again and again. And he is the ultimate people person.
He is.
He's the ultimate people person. He makes people feel special. He makes people feel $1 million. I will tell you one story. So it was 2018. It was February, March. He'd been in office just over a year. And I was over in Washington for the CPAC conference. I was speaking, and he was speaking. And that night, I finished up having dinner with him and some others, some family of his and some others. And there was a waitress. I don't know how old she was, 21. And she served his starter. And she said, just very quickly, I enjoyed your speech at CPAC today. And he goes, you're at CPAC? He said, yeah, I'm a young conservative. He said, right, get a chair. And a chair was pulled up, and she sat next to the President of the United States of America, who gave her 10 minutes of his undivided
She'll tell that story the rest of his life.
Undivided attention. There was no press there. There was no upside for him in PR terms or anything else in doing this. This was just him as a human being responding to a young person. And that's just one little episode of things that I've seen from Trump and just how incredible he is with people. It's a lovely story, isn't it?
That is a wonderful story. And as you mentioned, his nature, his kindness, I can't help but think, maybe I shouldn't even bring it up, but my goodness, you recently had a milkshake thrown at you, you had cement thrown at you.
Yeah.
Do you see any reason why it seems that it's people on the left, people on the social event that engage in it? I mean, there are some crazy wingnuts that'll do it on the other side too, but it seems it's far more prevalent.
Yes.
I don't know. Directed at people from their point of view.
Let's not kid ourselves. There are people on the extreme right who behave abominably. But they are outnumbered quite considerably.
Why is that?
Oh, it's simple. It's simple. See, the old left-right divisions, that I grew up with and understood, they're your traditional socialist against your traditional conservative. They can argue volubly with each other. And then at the end of the argument, go to a British pub and have a pint.
Or a cigar.
Or whatever it may be. The modern day left, the modern day sort of uber liberal left, they don't just disagree with us. You see, we just think they're a bit crackers. We just think they're idealistic, without understanding human nature, without understanding how the world works. We just kind of think they're a bit kooky and a bit odd. They hate us. It isn't that we disagree with their worldview.
If you hate someone throwing a milkshake in your face or whatever else,
they think they are better human beings than us. And if you think that, right, if you think you're a better human being than somebody else, then the levels to which you're prepared to go to silence the other argument can lead to extremes. This is why we have cancel culture. But how is it that American universities and British universities now want to cancel speakers? Surely the whole point of university is to expose young minds to different points of view so that they, through critical thinking, can make their own minds up. So it is this kind of superiority complex that the modern day left have.
And it calls to mind, as you mentioned, censorship. Recently, you were in Brussels, I believe. I had an event with Viktor Orban, with grassroots conservative. I mean, not just thought leaders, but elected officials from around Europe, and then the police tried to shut you down. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, it was a conference. The National Conservative Group, an American-based group, but with roots out into, maybe as you will soon, into the UK and Europe. And they put this conference on. And as you say, there was quite a distinguished list of speakers. There was some very prominent, Victor and Orban and other people, but quite distinguished people there. And the mayor of the local district in Brussels thought this shouldn't be allowed. Thought that because we were having this conference, that somehow we might pollute the minds of the residents that lived in this particular part of Brussels. And I was on stage when the police came in with a notice to close down the meeting. It was enormous fun. So when I saw them, I just said very loudly, "Ladies and gentlemen, there are the police. They've come to close down this meeting. Let me just tell you, if they want to get me out of this building, they'll physically have to drag me out." And it was live on television, a big audience, and they thought better of it. But what they did then do is they put a barricade on the door, and people could leave, but nobody could enter. So that was their effective way of closing it down. And that just shows you how dangerous all this thinking is. It is that we are to be suppressed, we are not to have an opinion. And this was happening on social media. I mean, social media over the last few years, the suppression of speech, the labeling of some things as coming under the hate category, or misinformation. Misinformation increasingly is a point of view that the established government doesn't agree with. But it was getting really bad. It was getting really bad. And I think the November 2020 election here, presidential election, when the Hunter Biden laptop, the phone calls that Joe Biden himself was engaged in with Burisma, was being withheld from the American public. Anyone who tried to talk about it would get their account suspended or whatever it may be. And thank goodness for Elon Musk, because Musk has come along, and X is now a platform on which you can say things, and even Mark Zuckerberg, or better, has now apologized for his behavior in the past. So we are making a little bit of progress.
It's amazing, Elon Musk, before he bought Twitter, he is the man who started Tesla.
Yep.
The electric vehicle dream of the left.
Yeah.
And it used to be a virtue signaling among
Well, he was a pin-up boy.
Tesla.
He was a pin-up boy, wasn't he, for that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And as soon as he buys Twitter, and by the way, he's not censoring the left. He's just saying everybody has their say. We're not going to suppress conservative speech anymore. Now, it's amazing to see what's happened to Tesla demand, especially among the left, the elite left that used to be his core audience.
Yeah.
I guess it gets back to what you were saying before about just being the left so consumed with hate.
Think about Trump. The day before he walked down those escalators in Trump Tower in New York, he was like an all-American hero. Here was the bloke that had transformed the real estate in market in New York. Here was the guy with one of the most popular reality TV series,
The Apprentice,
ever been
cultural phenomenon.
Yeah, ever been seen in America. Here was the guy that, the gossip columns have written about for decades. This huge all-American figure.
Tremendous philanthropist.
Known around the world, great brand. You know what? He walks down the stairs that day, says he's running as a conservative, and they've never stopped attacking him.
So I think that as Trump says he's going to invite Elon Musk to have, whether it's formal, informal, but significant advisory role, maybe you can arrange to have Elon fly to London a few times.
We certainly need him. I mean, I have to say, it's a great idea in theory, but I think Musk has got a fair bit on his plate. It's all that I would say.
That is true. So it's always a pleasure to just have cigars with a friend, and I think it's relaxing. It kind of just brings out a person. Tell me what you enjoy about cigars. Tell me what kind of cigars you enjoy smoking.
Well, it's very different on our side of the pond because we have Cubans. Cubans are everywhere. So, whether it's the Romeo e Julietas or the Partagas or whatever it is, but it's getting harder and harder to smoke cigars in London. There are a few places left where you can, but there really aren't very many. But I'm a big fan that us sitting having a cigar would be very similar if we were sitting in an English pub having a chat. Because I do think that when people get together, they're able to talk, we create our own mini parliaments. Our own mini parliament.
Like that.
And we listen, and we could be here today with an extended group of people, and there could be somebody that says something we don't initially agree with, but after debate, we say, well, do you know what? You've got a point. And that is why open debate matters so very, very much. And let's face it, we're social animals. Human beings are social animals. That's why sitting here having a cigar with you is great.
I agree. One of my best friends, he is a very hardcore Democrat supporter, and we'll get into some verbal knockdown, drag-out brawls. But when it starts getting a little heated, I just turn to him and say, buddy, but I love you. And with the cigar, it relates. And the same thing, without the cigar, you may say, shut up and go away.
Well, but that's the essence of democratic freedom, isn't it? It's being able to agree to disagree, but to do so in a civil way. Very, very important.
I totally agree. And on that note, Nigel, it's been a pleasure to have a cigar with you today. Being able to call you a friend is a highlight of my life here. I really look forward to seeing what the future for Nigel Farage will be, and in that respect, the future of the UK. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you.
It's always a pleasure spending time with you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Heartland. And as far as my future is concerned, I've got one guarantee for you: it won't be dull.
Cheers to that.
Thank you.